but the President and the First Lady are sending their love to her entire family and everyone whose life was touched by her strength and service. Now, shifting gears to the storm. This morning, the President and the Vice President were briefed on the impacts from Hurricane Milton and will continue to be briefed throughout the day. We are praying for those who lost their lives and all the communities devastated by the storm. The President and the Vice President will do everything in our power to help with the respond, the recovery, and rebuild. Last night, in advance of Hurricane Milton making landfall, the President spoke by phone with several officials in Florida, including Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, Sarasota Mayor Liz Alpert, and Representative Gus Billarkis and Kathy Castor. This morning, President Biden also spoke to Governor DeSantis about the impacts of Hurricane Milton. The governor thanked the president for the extensive federal support to prepare for and respond to the storm. This afternoon, the president spoke with several additional Florida officials following the impacts of Hurricane Milton across the Florida Peninsula, including Senator Rick Scott, Representative Anna Paulina Luna, Gainesville Mayor Harvey Ward, Fort Myers Mayor Kevin Anderson, Orange County Mayor Jerry Demings, and Pasco County Chair Ron Oakley. The president told each of these leaders to call him directly if they need additional assistance on rescue, response, and recovery efforts. The president also emphasized that he will be with them and their communities no matter how long it takes. Additionally, FEMA Administrator Criswell has been on the ground in Florida since last night, and today she is surveying the damage alongside her state and local counterparts and will work closely with them to determine any unmet needs. At the direction of the president, FEMA and the federal family began to quickly deploy resources to assist with rescue and response operations, including over 1,200 urban search and rescue personnel and the 3 Coast Guard swift water rescue teams with rescues already underway. Over 1,000 federal personnel, all focused on helping the people of Florida respond and recover. And over 15 million meals and 13 million liters of water are already in the region, with 20 million meals and 40 million liters of water ready to be deployed. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has 2 temporary power teams and a roofing team to diagnose the need for short-term repairs to homes and structures. The Department of Defense has also provided 60 high-water vehicles and personnel who can further aid in search and rescue efforts. To the people of Florida, this is still a very serious situation. Please remain vigilant. Listen to local officials. As the president has said, we will be here for you as long as it takes. Now, as you all know, this is an ongoing response, and we are getting information in real time. We're very grateful that we have the Secretary of Homeland Security, Mayorkas here, who is on the ground, here virtually obviously, who's on the ground in North Carolina surveying the damage and helping with response to Hurricane Helene. Regarding Hurricane Milton, we won't have all of the answers right now, but we want to provide as much information as we can. And so with that, I will turn it over to the Homeland Secretary and Homeland Security Secretary. Thank you so much again for joining us, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Karina. Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you fine. Thank you.
Thank you. So I am currently joining you from North Carolina, where I've been meeting with our extraordinary FEMA personnel and federal, state, and local partners on the ground about Hurricane Helene's devastating impact and the progress we are making in our work to help North Carolina communities and aid in their recovery. Before I share an update on the situation here in North Carolina, I'll provide you an update on Hurricane Milton, which last night made landfall as a Category 3 storm near Siesta Key, Florida, following a day of heavy rain and at least 27 tornado touchdowns. Our hearts break for the Floridians who have lost so much. I was briefed earlier by FEMA Administrator Criswell, who's on the ground in Florida, as Karine noted, along with more than 1,000 FEMA personnel. There is significant water and wind damage across central Florida. As of this morning, over 3 million customers are without power. Structures have been severely damaged or collapsed, and tragically, we know that lives have been lost. We are praying for them and their loved ones. Right now, search and rescue is our highest priority, and we are also praying for those who are unaccounted for and for their safe return. It is very significant that many followed local guidance and evacuated ahead of landfall. We cannot minimize the impact of that. It is imperative that everyone continues to follow the direction of local officials. Milton may have passed, but the danger it poses has not. Downed power lines, flood waters, non-potable drinking water, and debris are creating deadly conditions. Keep listening to local officials and shelter in place until it is safe, if told to do so. Only use generators when and where it is safe to do so. People can find more tips on staying safe after a storm on the FEMA app or by visiting ready.gov. In the lead up to Milton, our administration made robust preparations for the storm. President Biden approved emergency declarations for the state of Florida and for the Seminole tribe of Florida days before the storm made landfall to provide full federal support for the response. We pre-positioned supplies, including food and water, 20 helicopters, 60 Department of Defense high water vehicles with ladders, 1,300 U.S. Coast Guard personnel, and 1,400 urban search and rescue team members across Florida in anticipation of the storm, and staged hundreds of ambulances to assist in the transport of hospitalized patients. Today, FEMA is joining the state to begin damage assessments to ensure Floridians have what they need. FEMA and our federal partners, including the Department of Defense and the United States Coast Guard, are already working closely to support the state of Florida in a comprehensive, coordinated response to the storm. To reiterate President Biden's message yesterday, every available resource is being deployed as fast as possible to impacted communities, and we will not leave until the work is done. The same is true for communities devastated by Hurricane Helene, including here in North Carolina. President Biden and Vice President Harris were here last week, as was I, and we will continue to support impacted communities and first responders on the ground. More than 10,000 federal staff are on the ground supporting Helene and Milton response efforts across the Southeast. Since Helene first made landfall, urban search and rescue teams have rescued over 4,300 people. From a peak of 5.1 million customers without power, we have helped restore power for more than 5 million of them. And we are restoring more every day. We have helped quickly restore cell phone service across the region. At its peak, 3.4 million customers were without service. We have restored service now to more than 3.2 million of them. We have delivered more than 17.2 million meals and more than 13.9 million liters of water. We have helped get over $350 million in assistance out to Helene survivors, with millions more going out every day. All this and much more. These first responders and their state and local partners are doing truly heroic work in extremely difficult circumstances. We are all immensely grateful for their extraordinary, selfless service. The weeks since Hurricane Helene first made landfall have been devastating and difficult. But I want to be clear, we have the capability and the capacity to respond to and recover from multiple simultaneous disasters. No resources needed for Hurricane Helene response will be diverted to respond to Hurricane Milton. We have made it clear we will be there for every impacted community, every step of the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We'll go to questions. Go ahead, Kayla.
Thank you so much. Mr. Secretary, this is Kayla Tauchi from CNN. President Biden indicated that FEMA and the Department of Defense would have enough money to get through their immediate needs in this recovery phase. I'm wondering, after your early assessments of the damage from Hurricane Milton, now coupled with the damage from Hurricane Helene, do you still believe that to be the case?
Yes, I do. We have the resources to respond to the immediate needs of individuals impacted by Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton and the associated, and it's very important to remember, the tornadoes associated with the hurricane. That being said, we will need additional funds, and we implore Congress, when it returns, to in fact fund FEMA as is needed.
If I could, just a quick follow-up. You said on CNN yesterday that some of the misinformation that had been perpetuated around these storms was already beginning to have an impact on individuals either applying or deciding not to apply for government relief. Can you elaborate on what exactly you're seeing and what exactly you determined to be the cause of that?
So let me repeat that in fact the false information that is being spread deliberately does have a real life impact on survivors, and it is also demoralizing for those heroic individuals who are risking their lives in the service of others. Let me give you one example. There is false information that federal employees who are there to help people will actually take their land. And what we have seen is people reticent, reluctant to access the relief to which they are entitled and which will help them because of the fear that that false information has instilled in them.
Good, Mary.
That is just one example.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mary Bruce with ABC. Another question on misinformation. We've seen reports that some FEMA officials, including the administrator, are being doxxed and targeted online in the wake of these hurricanes. Are you concerned that individuals involved in the recovery effort are being threatened online?
We most certainly are. We are seeing horrific hate speech of all types propagated on online platforms. That deplorable speech has an impact on people's lives, and it is also a motivating force for people to do harm. And it has got to stop. And it is our work in the Department of Homeland Security to combat hate in all its forms. We will continue that work.
Do you have any information to suggest that any foreign governments have tried to take advantage and amplify this misinformation about the response and recovery effort?
I have not been alerted to that phenomenon. We, of course, have seen foreign nations disseminate false information for other purposes. I have not seen it in the context of Hurricane Helene or the Hurricane Milton, which just transpired. But of course, we are quite vigilant in monitoring that.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Thank you, Secretary Mayorkas. It's Nancy Cordes from CBS News. Hurricane Milton knocked out power to more than 3 million customers. How does the scope of the power situation compare to other disasters? And what is the federal government's role in coordinating the restoration of that power? How long will it take?
So, Nancy, a number of questions. Unclear how long it's going to take because, quite frankly, the damage assessment is still underway. So we're at a very, very early stage. Our role generally is to support the state and local officials, the state and local resources, to augment those resources and to work very, very closely alongside them. And we are doing so both in response to Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. But, the response is actually in a number of phases. The immediate phase is search and rescue, life and safety of individuals. And then we go from search and rescue to response and then to recovery. We work very closely with the state and local officials to rebuild whatever infrastructure has been damaged to get power up. We have the capacity to assist, and we also work with the private sector. We have the ability to deliver power immediately, but for the long term, very often infrastructure has to be rebuilt. My visit here in North Carolina underscored that fact, because one of the long-term challenges is going to be to rebuild the water system in a number of cities where it's been completely decimated.
Yeah, Jackie.
Thanks, Green. Mr. Secretary, it's Jackie Heinrich from Fox. I want to ask you about a different story. This Afghan national who was working for the CIA in Afghanistan was arrested for planning an election day terror plot. He was brought to the U.S. after Afghanistan collapsed. Your agency says as part of the SIV program. The State Department is telling us he was not part of the SIV program, which had strenuous vetting. They say he was never issued an SIV or immigrant visa, and DHS paroled him into the U.S. They further expect the court document to be updated to reflect this from the DOJ side. So, Mr. Secretary, how was this man brought into the U.S.? What screening did he undergo? What did he apply for to get here?
Jackie, I'm here in North Carolina communicating with the individuals who are still conducting search and rescue operations. Over 200 people have lost their lives in Hurricane Helene. We have reports that at least 10 individuals have lost their lives as a result of Hurricane Milton. I'd be very pleased to answer your question in a different setting, but we're here to talk about emergencies and the support that we can deliver to people in desperate need. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Mr. Secretary, but we're getting conflicting answers from your agency and from the State Department about a man who was arrested for an election day terror plot. How do you not have those answers prepared?
Oh, Jackie, that's not what I said. What I said is I'd be pleased to discuss this issue at a different time, but I am here to speak about disasters that have impacted people's lives in real time, and that is a subject that I'm addressing today.
Mr. Secretary, can you assure people that appropriate steps have been taken to secure the country against these kinds of threats? Because the outstanding question is whether this man was radicalized before the U.S. government brought him here or afterward. And people should be concerned about that.
Jackie, your persistence in questioning can be matched by my persistence in answers.
All right, we're going to go. Go ahead, Gabe.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. Gabe Gutierrez here with NBC. I want to go back to the funding question a little bit more specifically. So 8 days into the fiscal year, the federal government has spent nearly half of the money that Congress has allocated for disaster relief for the next 12 months. How concerning is that?
It is very concerning, but let me be clear. We can meet the immediate needs arising from Hurricane Helene, Hurricane Milton, and the tornadoes associated with it. When Congress returns, we will need them to act swiftly to appropriately fund the disaster relief fund upon which FEMA relies to deliver assistance to people after extreme weather events. And so we can meet the immediate needs. We will need funding very rapidly.
What if there's another disaster next week?
We are working on a continuing resolution. That is not stable footing for the work that we do in disaster response. And so that is why I underscore the need for Congress to act swiftly upon its return.
Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you, Green. Mr. Secretary, Michael Wilner with McClatchy. Just want to ask you specifically about the National Flood Insurance Program. Already the NFIP has been chronically in the red. How do you anticipate Milton will affect that program, and is there a specific ask of Congress?
Michael, I'll have to follow up with you on that, but I've been in the Department of Homeland Security as the Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services and the Deputy Secretary, and now, of course, as the Secretary. And I've always known the flood insurance program to be in the red.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, this is Courtney Rosen from Bloomberg Government. I would like to ask about the upcoming election in the next couple weeks. Are you thinking about that issue in terms of voters being able to access their polling places in states that are having such significant damage?
Courtney, we have seen state and local officials who are, of course, on point in ensuring access to voting. We have seen them take measures to ensure that people can, in fact, reach their polling places. Some polling places have been damaged, for example, as a result of Hurricane Helene, but they are pivoting to make sure that there are other facilities available to them, and they'll have different places at which they can place their votes. And this is something that the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency of our department, CISA, as it is known by its acronym, works very closely with state and local officials to assist in that regard.
Can you give an example of one way that they are assisting in this time?
So what we do, there are three threat vectors. There's physical violence. There's the concern about physical violence. There is the concern about cyber attacks, and there's the concern about disinformation. An example is that we are protective security advisors in each state that assist state and local officials in sharing best practices about how to secure the facilities, both from a physical perspective and a cyber security perspective. That would be one example.
Okay, go ahead. We're going to start wrapping it up. But go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. This is Skylar Woodhouse with Bloomberg News. As you mentioned earlier, you said that FEMA, will need funds when Congress comes back. But if there is another disaster prior to Congress coming back to session, and as you continue to work with Helene and Milton, will FEMA have to perhaps stop offering services or sending out support for aid if you're running out of cash before Congress comes back?
No, it will not. We have the funds to address immediate needs. If we have to devote the resources that we have to immediate needs, we will do so at the expense of perhaps other long-term recovery efforts. We need Congress to act swiftly upon its return, but we will meet immediate needs.
All right, Jared, you have the last question.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, you talk about the need for Congress to come back and obviously replenish funds when they do that. I'm just curious, moving forward, as you look forward to future appropriation battles, does Congress need to rethink how they are funding FEMA and disaster relief? In other words, is it like an underfunded service and program of the federal government as is?
Let me take a step back and widen the aperture of that question, if I may. A continuing resolution is not a stable way to fund the federal government. Needs change from year to year, and we need real budgets upon which we can rely and upon which we can predicate responsible financial planning and financial management. So a continuing resolution only retains a level of instability in the work that we do in terms of the assurance of the funding that we need. The Disaster Relief Fund and the funding of it should be completely nonpartisan and apolitical. This is a fund that provides much needed relief to individuals regardless of party. And I have said publicly many a time since Hurricane Helene first hit in late September, that when our brave individuals, and I say our meaning not just federal, but federal, state, and local, reach into flooded waters to save an individual, they are not asking about that individual's party affiliation. They are rescuing a fellow human being, and we need to be funded accordingly.
All right.
Just one quick one to follow up, Secretary.
Wait, hold on. Go ahead, Will. I told him it was the last question. So, Mr. Secretary, we have one more for you. Go ahead, Will.
Sorry. It's Will Weiser with AP. You mentioned at least 10 people killed in relation to Milton. Is that were those tornado deaths? Can you give us a little bit more information about where that number came from?
So let me be clear, and this is something I want to echo that Karine mentioned at the very outset. This is a very fluid situation. we are just beginning damage assessment. So we have 10 confirmed fatalities. Our understanding is that those fatalities were caused by the tornadoes, but I just want to introduce a little bit of tentativeness to that because of the fluidity of the situation and how nascent it is.
All right.
It is our job to make sure that that number doesn't climb through valiant search and rescue efforts, but we are dealing in the immediate aftermath of a terrible hurricane and many, many tornadoes ancillary to it.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.